Dit programma is mede mogelijk gemaakt door Bundel, ITAR Innovative Technology, Real Root Supplements, Pro Privacy en Moringa's Finest.
There is a very strange object flying past our sun. We don't exactly know what this thing is or what it's doing. We can't even see it anymore.
22 december interviewde ik lucht- en ruimtevaartingenieur Dr. Coen Vermeeren over het mysterie van Three Eye Atlas dat de wereld al maanden in zijn greep heeft. Is het louter een komeet of is er meer aan de hand? Volgens Harvard-professor Avi Loeb is er sprake van een interstellair object dat door een buitenaardse beschaving hierheen is gezonden. Maar volgens Steven Greer is dat een psy-op. Vandaag tonen we twee andere perspectieven in een docu-tweeluik dat we van Nederlandse ondertitels hebben voorzien. Die van de wetenschap en die van het inheemse indianenvolk, de Hopi. Toeval of toch een profetie? Oordeel zelf.
There is a lot that we know about this new visitor to our solar system. In just 4 months, there have been nearly 100 research papers published on Three Eye Atlas, and there is plenty of other information out there that doesn't appear on the official record. Some of it can sound pretty insane. So today, we're going to cut through the noise and we are getting to the bottom of everything you actually need to know about Three Eye Atlas. Let's talk about the journey of this interstellar object. Right now, Three Eye Atlas is making its closest approach to the sun. We call this phase perihelion, and the peak occurs on October 29th when the object will pass within about 210 million kilometers of our star. Although in space we typically use a larger form of measurement, that's the astronomical unit, or AU. 1 AU represents the average distance between the Earth and the Sun, which helps us to bring a familiar sense of scale to the vastness of the solar system. So the perihelion of Three Eye Atlas occurs at 1.4 astronomical units away from the Sun, which means it doesn't actually get that close. It's somewhere just inside the orbit of Mars. But this will be the time of peak activity for Three Eye Atlas. This is the hottest that it will get, which means that a lot of material from the surface of the object is going to get blasted out into space. Now, that's normal for a comet. We call this process sublimation. It's what happens when a solid material transitions directly into a gas, because there's no liquid in the vacuum of space. And sublimation is what gives a comet its distinct look, with a fuzzy halo and a long tail. The halo is made of all the gas and dust being ejected from the hard surface of the object. It's technically known as the coma. The tail is created by solar wind. That's a name for the waves of radiation that constantly flow from the surface of the sun. This wind blows back all of the lightest bits of dust and gas from the coma and pushes it away from the comet. It's a spectacular piece of cosmic ballet, and unfortunately, we don't get to see this happening to Three Eye Atlas as it flies through its peak exposure to the sun because we are on the wrong side. Call it fate or call it something else, our view of the perihelion is completely blocked out by the glare of the sun. Okay, so we know where Three Eye Atlas is right now, and we have a pretty good idea of what it's doing, so while we wait for it to reappear on the other side, that gives us an opportunity to investigate how it got here in the first place, and this is a deeply fascinating story. We have been tracking Three Eye Atlas since July 2025. It was officially spotted by the Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, or ATLAS, which is actually a bunch of telescopes all around the world in places like Hawaii, Chile, and South Africa. What they do is stare at the night sky and look for moving objects. And that is what they saw on the night of July 1st, just another moving object. So they classify it as a new asteroid and they're ready to move on. But then they notice something weird about this one. It's moving too fast. Everything in space is constantly in motion, and every object in the solar system rotates around the sun because we are all trapped by its force of gravity. The fact that we are moving is what keeps us from falling into the well of gravity, and the closer you get to the sun, the faster you have to move in order to stay afloat. But if you start to move fast enough, then you actually start to rise up out of the well. And if you reach a certain velocity, then you break free completely of the sun's gravity and you can fly out into interstellar space. You enter the void of nothingness that exists between stars. And when astronomers clocked the velocity of this new asteroid, they were shocked. This was the fastest moving object ever detected in our solar system. Let's establish some scale here. The planet Earth orbits the sun at a speed of 30 kilometers per second. That's us. We're moving pretty fast and we're pretty close to the sun, but there are planets that are a lot closer. Here is Mercury, 0.4 astronomical units from the surface of the sun. It gets cooked, and to avoid falling into the gravity well, Mercury has to orbit at a velocity of around 48 kilometers per second. The new object discovered by Atlas was moving at 58 kilometers per second, and at the time, it was still way out there, just inside the orbit of Jupiter. That's about 4.5 AU away from the sun. And at that speed, it was clear that this object was going to blow straight past the sun and just keep on going. We call this a hyperbolic trajectory, meaning that this thing had come from the void, from interstellar space, and that's where it was going to return after completing its grand tour of our solar system. This is when the name 3I Atlas came to be, third interstellar object, which means there were two before it. You probably know this one, Oumuamua, the first ever identified interstellar visitor, and it was also pretty weird, although it was weird in a totally different way than Atlas is, and we'll get deeper into that very soon. But we also have a second interstellar object, the often overlooked middle child, 2I Borisov, which was actually not that weird. Aside from the fact that it was interstellar, it basically just acted like a normal comet. So, if anything, it was weirdly not weird. There are three big differences between 3I Atlas and its interstellar siblings. One is size. It's literally much bigger. Oumuamua was up to 400 meters across. Borisov was as wide as 1 kilometer, but 3I Atlas could be up to 5.6 kilometers in width. 2 is speed. Atlas travels at about double the velocity of Oumuamua and Borisov. And 3 is the direction that the object came from, and this is the really weird one. Oumuamua came in from above, from the northern sky, which is the general direction that the solar system is moving. So we're all orbiting the sun, but the sun itself is also orbiting around the center of the Milky Way galaxy, and it's dragging us along with it. So as much as Oumuamua hit us, we also kind of ran into it. 2I Borisov did mostly the same thing. It came in at more of a diagonal angle than straight on, but from the same general direction. Now, 3I Atlas is not another head-on collision. This one is a T-bone, and it's coming in on that side angle in almost perfect alignment with all of the planets. Our solar system is like a disk of stuff that all formed around the sun. Over time, all of that stuff kept smashing into each other and forming into planets and moons and asteroids and things, but it all remained in a relatively flat disk shape. We call that disk the plane of the ecliptic. There are only a few things that are a little bit offset from that plane. The most recognizable one would be Pluto. Its orbit is tilted by 17 degrees, so sometimes it's a little above the plane of the ecliptic and sometimes it's below. It's important to know that so we can appreciate how well aligned 3I Atlas actually is. The interstellar object is only 3 degrees off from that ecliptic plane. It hit our solar system in perfect alignment with the disk. Space is 3-dimensional, and that object could have come from any direction. So to have something hit us almost perfectly side on, it's a very big coincidence. But that leads us into an even bigger question. Where did 3I Atlas come from? Well, we know that it came from the direction of the galactic core. So if we look at the Milky Way galaxy from this usual top-down perspective, you are here in this kind of outer half of the galaxy, located in a spiral arm. When you see the Milky Way in the night sky, that's the next spiral arm over. Anyway, 3I Atlas came from the direction of this bright core in the middle. It's bright because it's full of stars, and they're packed together much more tightly than the ones in our neighborhood. But again, space is 3-dimensional, so to really understand where 3I Atlas originated, we need to flip the galaxy over to a side view. And just like our solar system, most of the stuff in the Milky Way is concentrated in a thin disk around the core. But also like our solar system, there are a few things that kind of hang out above and below the thin disk. In the galaxy, we call that area the thick disk. It's a lot less crowded in the thick disk, so you don't get nearly as many giant collisions and supernova explosions and black holes and stuff. So things in this region tend to just hang out undisturbed for very long periods of time. And that's where astronomers believe 3I Atlas came from, this ancient region of space, which could make it as old as 7.6 billion years, nearly twice the age of our own planet. Now, we'll probably never be able to trace the journey of 3I Atlas all the way back to its point of origin, but astronomers have recently managed to backtrack over 10 million years, and they've identified 93 stars that the object would have encountered over that period. But what's deeply fascinating is that over the course of that 10 million years, the closest it would have come to any of those 93 other stars was a distance of 0.3 light years. That's 63,000 astronomical units. And right now, 3I Atlas is just 1.4 AU away from our own sun. Now let's talk a little bit more about how 3I Atlas approached the sun and what we learned about it along the way. Even though 3I Atlas was officially discovered on July 1st, it was actually spotted for the first time on May 7th, 2025. It showed up in images captured by the Transiting Exoplanet Survey Satellite, or TESS. It's an observatory that orbits the Earth and looks deep into the galaxy, trying to identify new planets in other star systems. And for a period of about 1 month, TESS just happened to be looking in the direction of 3I Atlas. This gave us the opportunity to track the object as it moved through the orbit of Jupiter. The first thing that astronomers wanted to measure was the object's brightness and how it changed over time. That's going to tell us about what this thing is made of. We know that in the 1 month period that 3I Atlas was observed by TESS, it traveled about 1 AU in the direction of the sun, so we would expect it to get brighter over that time. Astronomers use a term called flux to describe the perceived brightness of an object in space. Here's an example of how this works. Think about how bright the sun appears from your location at noon on a clear day. Now imagine you're transported to the surface of Mercury. That same sun is going to suddenly appear a whole lot brighter, bright enough to incinerate you. Now, the actual brightness of the sun didn't change, only your perception of it. That is flux. So astronomers had a hypothesis that the flux of 3I Atlas would increase by a factor of 1.5 between May and June. But data from TESS showed that the flux actually increased by a factor of 5. So there was a massive increase in the amount of light being reflected by this object. And that's how we know that this isn't an asteroid. So it must be a comet that's beginning to form its coma of gas and dust, which is what's reflecting all of that excess light. Only there are 2 weird things about this observation. One has to do with the polarization of light. Now this is a tough one to explain, so we're going to oversimplify here. When light from the sun hits that cloud of gas and dust around 3I Atlas, it's going to scatter in different directions. But the direction that the light bounces is not random. It can tell us a lot about the material that the light is hitting. If the light scatters off to the side at a right angle or perpendicular, then we call that positive polarization. If the light bounces straight back in a parallel direction, then we call that negative polarization. Most objects in space have a mostly positive polarization, even interstellar objects. 2I Borisov was positive, but 3I Atlas is negative, and not only that, it has the most extreme negative polarization of any object ever discovered. That is pretty weird, and it's just one of the many oddities about 3I Atlas that tells us not all solar systems are the same. What we think is normal here would be weird somewhere else, and what's normal in a different star system is considered weird around here. And then the second surprising thing about the coma of 3I Atlas was the fact that it even existed at all. Remember, we're looking at this period between May and June, and 3I Atlas is still way out there beyond the orbit of Jupiter. This is over 5 AU away from the sun. It's cold out there. It's so cold that we don't typically spot comets at 5 AU because they typically have not begun to form their coma yet. They're still frozen solid. It's not usually until somewhere between 3 and 4 AU that the sublimation process really kicks in. And that's because typical comets from our solar system are typically made of water ice, which needs a lot of energy to melt. But as we continued to observe 3i Atlas and we started pointing our most powerful telescopes directly at it, we learned that the coma was actually dominated by CO2 gas. It did have some water vapor, but the ratio of CO2 was much higher at around 8:1. That's basically the opposite or inverse of what we are used to finding in comets. If you've ever seen dry ice before, it's typically used to create a smoky effect for live performances. That's frozen CO2. It has to be created and stored at incredibly cold temperatures. And as soon as it's removed from the deep freeze, dry ice will instantly begin to sublimate, making that signature cloud of gas. That is what 3i Atlas was doing way out there in space. And that's why its coma formed so early, because CO2 ice melts at a much lower temperature than water ice. And we've continued to observe 3i Atlas on its approach to the sun. We've seen that ratio of CO2 and water begin to flip. By late in September, as it was passing through the orbit of Mars at just over 1.5 AU, the object had actually begun to release a massive amount of water vapor, about the equivalent of a fire hose running at full blast, which is actually more water than we would expect even from a normal comet at this distance. We've never seen so much water vapor appear so suddenly. The same thing can be said for metal in the coma of 3i Atlas. When it was observed over the summer, astronomers detected a small amount of nickel in the surrounding cloud, but they did not detect any iron. So a couple of things to note here. One is that nickel and iron are pretty common in the universe because they are formed inside the core of a dying star. Then that star goes supernova and blasts these metals out into the surrounding area of space, where it gets pulled in by new stars that are beginning to form their own planetary disk, and then the process repeats. So because nickel and iron come from the same place, they're typically found together in planets, moons, asteroids, and comets. So when we see a lot of nickel but no iron, we wonder where the iron went, what process separated them. And thing number two, it's weird to see any metal at all sublimating from 3i Atlas given its distance to the sun when this observation was made. It's still way out beyond Mars in the region of the asteroid belt, which is still very cold, and the process of sublimation is driven by heat. Now, when it comes to CO2, we know that it doesn't need much heat in order to melt, but when we're talking about metal, there's something else going on. Likely, the massive release of CO2 is dragging nickel atoms along with it, but that still doesn't account for the iron deficiency. Now, just like water vapor made a very sudden appearance in the coma of 3i Atlas, the same thing did eventually happen with iron. By late into September, astronomers had started to detect iron for the first time in the coma. And then, very quickly, the ratio of nickel to iron changed to a more normal combination of the two. So 3i Atlas is becoming more normal over time, but it's getting there in a very strange way. Now, let's talk about tails. This is another area where 3i Atlas has behaved a little different from your average comet. And that's mostly because the first time we saw a tail forming around 3i Atlas back in the summer, it was pointing in the wrong direction. This object initially formed a sun-facing tail. This is unusual because the tail is considered to be an effect of the solar wind interacting with the coma. The solar wind blows away from the sun, so therefore we expect the tail to flow in that direction. In this case, it didn't, which could be related to the early formation of the coma, which was due to the high CO2 concentration. Because the object began sublimating at a very long distance from the sun, it's possible that the solar wind just wasn't strong enough yet to push the cloud of gas and dust away. So what we saw was more of that cloud accumulating on the warm side of the object, the sun-facing side, before it encountered a strong enough wind to form a conventional tail, which is what 3i Atlas eventually did. By September, a short fan-shaped tail facing away from the sun had developed, which is pretty normal. Not all comets have long streaking tails like what we're used to seeing in illustrations. The length of the tail varies according to what the comet is made of and its distance to the sun. For example, Hale-Bopp is pretty famous for having a gigantic tail when it was observed in 1997, but it was also very close to the sun at that time, about 0.9 AU, 1/2 of an AU closer than 3i Atlas will ever get to the sun. So, of course, it experienced more sublimation and solar wind, which shaped that tail. And it's around this time that we actually get our closest possible observation of 3I Atlas, but the view doesn't come from the Earth, it comes from Mars. On October 3rd, the object passes within 0.19 AU of the planet Mars, the closest it will come to any planet in the solar system. And this is lucky for us because we have a lot of cameras on and around the red planet, which means we were able to use them to image 3I Atlas. Here is a photograph taken by the Perseverance rover from the surface of Mars. This is how the object would have appeared in the night sky. It's not a great picture, this isn't what the rover's camera was designed for, and in order to see this much light, the camera had to take 30-second long exposures, then several of those images were stacked on top of each other, so what you end up with is more like a streak than a defined object. And here is another image of 3I Atlas taken by the European Space Agency's ExoMars probe, which hangs out in orbit around Mars. We can see the object a little more clearly now, but there's still not enough resolution to distinguish between the bright coma and the surface of the object itself. In order to get that fine detail, we would need to take a photo with NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, which has the most powerful telescope in the Mars system. Unfortunately, at the time we are making this video, that image has not been released, if it was even taken at all. Basically, there's been a shutdown of the US government, and people at NASA aren't going to work until some political stuff gets resolved, which unfortunately could take some time. But time is something that we have right now, because the sun is going to continue blocking our view of 3I Atlas until early December, at which point we'll be able to study the effect that the sun had on the object, although the closest that we'll get is still 1 AU. That happens on December 19th. At this point, 3I Atlas will be well on its way out of the solar system, but there is just one more close encounter still to come. On March 16th, 2026, the object will fly within 0.36 AU of Jupiter. While we don't have nearly as many cameras around Jupiter as we do at Mars, we do have one. It's on a probe called Juno, which has spent the past decade observing the gas giant and its moons. But it will have a chance to take one last image of 3I Atlas before it disappears. Now, at this distance, the object will be cooling down. It's going to be less active, but it could be changed by its exposure to the sun, and that will add an extra layer of understanding to these interstellar objects. It's entirely possible that a lot of these strange characteristics didn't even come from the place where the object was formed. It's just an accumulation of weird stuff that it picked up along the way. For now, we can only wonder, but more answers, en probably more questions, are soon to come.
Ja, je hebt gekeken naar het wetenschappelijke perspectief van 3I Atlas, het mysterie dat nog steeds heel veel vragen oproept. En zometeen gaan we verder met de visie van de Hopi-indianen. Een mooie gelegenheid voor een pauze, een kopje koffie of even een sanitaire stop. Of nog beter, je te abonneren op ons kanaal. En je kan natuurlijk ook overwegen om Lighthouse TV bouwer te worden, zodat wij kunnen doorgaan met onze missie het licht schijnen op dat wat gezien moet worden. Een prettige voortzetting.
In the cold silence between the stars, something moves, a traveler from another sun. Astronomers named it 3I Atlas, the third interstellar visitor ever found. But to the Hopi, it is not a rock, nor a comet. It is the blue star messenger, the sign spoken of in ancient songs, a light that returns when the world forgets its balance. One sees data, the other sees destiny. But what if both are true? Stay, and remember. Because what approaches may not end the world. It may remind it how to begin again. The desert remembers, even when we forget. For countless generations, the Hopi people have lived among the mesas of northern Arizona, where silence is sacred and the wind still carries the breath of their ancestors. Under vast skies painted with constellations, they spoke of cycles, worlds that rise, fall, and return. Each ending, they said, is not destruction, but correction. In their oldest stories, the elders tell of the blue star Kachina, the dancer of the heavens who will appear at the turning of the age. When this blue star shines in the sky, it marks the moment before the Great Purification, a time when the earth rebalances herself, when humanity is reminded of what it has forgotten. When the blue star dances and removes her mask, the elders whisper, the time of great change will begin. The Hopi remember 3 worlds before ours, each destroyed by imbalance. The first world was ended by fire, the second by ice, the third by flood. Each time, those who remembered harmony were guided into the next world, while those who turned away from spirit faded into dust. We live now, they say, in the 4th world, the one born of both memory and amnesia. It is a world of machines and noise where humanity has learned to speak to the stars, but forgotten how to listen to the earth. The prophecy warns that when greed outweighs gratitude, when the sky is scarred by metal birds, and the rivers no longer sing, the blue star will return to remind us. But the Hopi do not speak of punishment, they speak of renewal. The blue star is not the destroyer, it is the mirror. It reveals what we have become, and what we might still become again. In sacred ceremonies, the Hopi dancers wear masks representing the Kachinas, beings of light who bridge the worlds of spirit and matter. Each dance is a dialogue between heaven and earth, a reminder that the divine is not distant, it is participatory. The blue star Kachina is said to be the last to dance, the final messenger before the 5th world begins. When the elders describe her, their words shimmer with poetry and code, a light that moves between colors, blue and red, shiny awakening and revealing, a celestial heartbeat pulsing in rhythm with the earth's own. A message carried not in language, but in resonance. They say those who walk in beauty, those who live in balance with the land and honor the sacred, will endure. The Hopi word for this balance is tuakatsi, life in harmony. To walk in beauty is to remember that all life is connected, and that every star is a relative, not a stranger. Across centuries, these prophecies were kept in stone tablets, in oral chants, in patterns woven into cornmeal and sand, not as superstition, but as memory. Because prophecy, to the Hopi, is not about foretelling the future. It is about remembering the rhythm of existence, the heartbeat of creation itself. And now, far beyond our world, something moves once more through the dark, glowing faintly blue. The sky begins to whisper again. But what if this light, the one we call 3i Atlas, is not a coincidence at all? Comes a signal, a faint pulse from the edge of interstellar darkness. In early 2020, astronomers detected a luminous body entering the solar system, an object they named 3i Atlas, the 3rd known visitor from beyond our sun. But from the moment it appeared, Atlas refused to behave like anything we knew. It glided through space with uncanny precision, neither bound to the gravity of the sun nor shaped by the familiar arc of a comet. Its light shifted rhythmically, blue to red, red to blue, as if breathing. To NASA, this was an optical anomaly, a matter of spectral variance. But to those who still remember the old prophecies, this light had another name, the 2 dancers, blue and red Kachina. The blue Kachina awakens, the red Kachina reveals. Together, they mark the turning of the world. As telescopes observed its oscillating glow, researchers found something uncanny, a modulation in the frequency of its emissions, hovering near 7.83 Hz. That same vibration hums invisibly around the Earth. The Schumann resonance, the planet's electromagnetic heartbeat. The numbers align too precisely to ignore. Coincidence or communication? Science explains, prophecy listens. Yet here both seem to speak the same language. Every pulse, every color shift from Atlas mirrored the rhythm of Earth herself. As if this traveler from the void were not simply passing through, but harmonizing, tuning itself to our world's hidden frequency. Some astrophysicists suggested that Atlas might be disintegrating, its nucleus fragmenting under solar radiation. But others noticed something stranger. The fragments moved in controlled geometry, as though guided. No known natural process could account for the symmetrical drift. It was as if the object were responding, adjusting its path deliberately, intelligently. When Atlas's faint blue tail began to brighten, observatories from Chile to Hawaii captured it flickering like a heartbeat across the night sky. Its color, temperature, and trajectory matched no known comet model. Its surface reflected light as though metallic, like a mirror catching the breath of distant suns. If it is natural, one astronomer said quietly, then nature is more intelligent than we imagined. But among the mesas of Arizona, the Hopi elders had already given this light a name, Sakwasahu, the blue star messenger. They said it would come from the heavens when the earth was ready to remember her song. And perhaps that is why its frequency hums in sync with our planet's resonance, not to warn, but to awaken. Because if the earth itself has a heartbeat, then perhaps the cosmos does too. And when both pulses align, the veil between matter and meaning begins to thin. Atlas may be a comet, or it may be a question, one written across light years, now arriving at our doorstep. Across ancient texts, there are echoes of this same arrival. The Mayan return of the gods, the Egyptian opening of the sky, the Sumerian day of awakening. All spoke of a time when a messenger from the stars would appear to restore balance after the age of disconnection. Now, as Atlas drifts closer, the line between myth and measurement blurs. Instruments capture data, hearts capture memory. Somewhere in that overlap, truth waits. And the question grows louder, not what is it, but why now? The Hopi would answer softly, because the earth called and the stars remembered. Yet the Hopi also spoke of those who once came before, the Watchers, the Star Brothers, who promised to return when the world forgot harmony. Gods, only reflections of what humanity once knew. Long before telescopes and satellites, the Hopi spoke of the Pahana, the Star Brothers, luminous beings who walked among the people during the first worlds. They came not to rule, but to teach. They showed how to plant by the rhythm of the moon, how to listen to the wind, how to live in balance with what breathes and burns. When humanity turned from silence to noise, when greed drowned gratitude, the Star Brothers withdrew. They will return, the elder said, when the sky trembles and the earth forgets her song. Some believe the blue star is their signal, a mirror opening in the heavens. Perhaps the Watchers never left at all. Perhaps they simply waited for us to look up again. The Hopi say the true visitation is not a ship descending from the stars, but awareness rising within the human heart. The Watchers return through memory, not metal. And once more the cosmos begins to remember itself through us. But the elders also warned, when the world remembers too late, balance must return through fire, not rage, she remembers. The Hopi say that each world ends the same way, not through divine punishment, but through imbalance. When humanity forgets its song, the earth sings louder. She purifies, not in wrath, but in rhythm. They call this time the Great Purification, the moment when fire, wind, and water dance together to restore balance to the living web. Science calls it climate feedback. The Hopi call it karma made visible. Volcanoes awaken as if exhaling what has long been buried. The air glows strangely at twilight, painted in the colors of iron and memory. Fires devour forests, floods reclaim cities, and storms carve new rivers through steel and stone. And through it all, the Hopi say, the earth is not dying, she is cleansing. When the blue star appears, one elder said, the earth will shake to remind her children that she is alive. In laboratories, scientists measure the same tremors, magnetic shifts, atmospheric surges, solar winds spiraling into auroras across polar skies. The data is real, but the meaning feels ancient. What physics calls energy rebalancing, the Hopi see as the Earth's spirit remembering its own equilibrium. For them, purification is not destruction, it is transformation. Fire destroys, fire renews. Just as a forest burns to make room for new growth, civilizations too must shed what no longer serves life. And perhaps that is what the Hopi foresaw, not apocalypse, but recalibration. Our fourth world, they said, would end by the union of earth and sky, by forces both human and celestial. Today we see that union everywhere. Satellites circling storms, machines mapping the pulse of oceans, technology woven into nature's breath. We have reached into the heavens, but forgotten how to kneel. In Hopi teaching, imbalance begins when we take more than we honor, when we treat the sacred as a resource and the living as an object. The Great Purification is not the planet's revenge. It is her response. The elders warned that those who live in arrogance will experience the purification as suffering, while those who live in balance will experience it as renewal. Look around. Fires in the west, floods in the east, drought where once was a river, storms where once was calm. These are not isolated tragedies. They are a single heartbeat, the earth adjusting her rhythm. Science speaks of rising temperatures, melting ice, and shifting poles. Yet beyond the data lies a deeper message. We are witnessing the same cycle the Hopi have kept in their memories for centuries. The same purification that ended the Third World is repeating, but this time the choice of how it unfolds is ours. For the Hopi, the purification is also inward. It begins in the human heart, the purification of greed, of division, of fear. Each person mirrors the planet. Our inner storms feed the outer ones. Our disconnection shapes her imbalance. They say that in this time truth will walk through fire unburned. Illusions will collapse. Systems built on deception will fall. Governments, markets, even religions that forget the sacredness of life will crumble, not because they are punished, but because they can no longer hold the vibration of truth. The Hopi have a saying, those who live for the earth will live with the earth. To them, survival is not technological, it is spiritual. It depends not on what we build, but what we remember. The purification is not meant to wipe us away, but to strip us bare, to remove what is false so the real can stand revealed. In this sense, every storm is a teacher. Every tremor is a prayer answered. Every fire is an invitation to begin again. The elders speak of America as both the land of great power and great forgetting. The first to burn, not in punishment, but as an example. America will burn, one prophecy says, so that the world may see what forgetting looks like. Not from wrath, but from awakening. As the planet trembles, so does consciousness. People everywhere begin to question the old ways, the false gods of progress, the blind worship of control. The Hopi foresaw this too. When the world loses its way, the truth will rise from the ashes. And perhaps that is why the blue star shines now, not to end, but to illuminate. To remind us that even in collapse, there is creation. Even in death, there is dawn. In this great purification, the Hopi say, two kinds of people will emerge. Those who cling to the burning house, and those who walk calmly through the smoke carrying seeds. The question is not will we survive, but what will we choose to become? Because the fifth world, they say, waits beyond the ashes. It is not built, it is remembered. And when the smoke clears, when the earth exhales and the silence returns, the elders say the fifth world will rise, not from the sky above, but from the heart within. The light returns, soft at first, like dawn breaking through dust. The Hopi say that after each purification the earth is reborn. A new world rises not from invention, but from remembrance. They call it the fifth world, a world of balance, humility, and truth. But the path to it, they warn, is not granted by the stars. It is chosen by the heart. The fifth world, one elder whispers, will not descend from the heavens. It will rise from within. We often imagine salvation as something that arrives, a savior, a sign, a miracle from beyond. But to the Hopi, awakening begins when humanity becomes what it has been seeking. The blue star messenger does not bring deliverance, it brings a mirror. In that reflection, each soul must decide which light to follow, because, as the elders say, two suns will rise in the sky. One is the sun of fear, burning with the illusion of control, greed, and separation. The other is the sun of awakening, gentle, radiant, born from remembrance. Both will shine at once, but only one will guide us home. This prophecy, like all Hopi teachings, is not about external fate. It is about inner resonance. Every civilization, every individual, stands at this threshold again and again. Fear or faith, control or connection, forgetfulness or remembering. As 3I Atlas nears the inner solar system, scientists speak of increased solar flux, of magnetic realignments and atmospheric energy spikes. But perhaps these outer storms echo the inner ones. The Hopi say the same. The earth and humanity share one heart. When we shift, she shifts. When she purifies, so do we. That is why the fifth world is not a place, it is a frequency. Those who live in harmony will simply rise into it, like air growing lighter after a storm. Those who cling to illusion will remain heavy, unable to move through the gate of remembrance. The elders describe this passage not as death, but as transfiguration, a subtle change of consciousness. When the fifth world dawns, time will no longer bind memory. The veil between life and spirit will thin. Humanity will remember its origin not as dust, but as light. This new world is not built from machines or empires. It grows from empathy, from gratitude, from the quiet decision to walk in beauty again. The Hopi teach that the new world will come through the awakening of the human heart, not the strength of the human hand. So how does one cross into the fifth world? Not by leaving Earth, but by listening to her. By planting rather than consuming, by giving rather than grasping. By remembering that consciousness is not human, it is cosmic and we are its reflection. Every storm that passes, every ember that fades leaves behind a clearing, a chance to begin differently. The fifth world is that clearing. It is not utopia, it is balance restored. In this world, technology and spirit no longer oppose each other. Science becomes reverence. Knowledge becomes gratitude. The Hopi say that the fifth world will reunite what was divided. The mind and the heart, the human and the star, the individual and the whole. Imagine that moment, when the two suns become one. When fear dissolves and only light remains. Some physicists speak of a future solar alignment in 2025, when the Earth, Sun, and several outer planets will form a near-perfect geometric resonance. They call it a coincidence. The Hopi call it the remembering of the heavens. When the cosmic clock resets and life begins its next measure. The fifth world, they say, will not appear suddenly. It will unfold quietly, through choice after choice, through small awakenings, kindness instead of conquest, stillness instead of noise, truth instead of comfort. Each act of remembering is a seed. Each seed becomes light. And when enough light gathers, the new dawn will no longer be myth. It will be morning. That is why the elders never warned of doom. They spoke of responsibility. Because prophecy, at its core, is not a threat. It is a guide. It asks not, what will happen to us, but who will we become? Those who walk in beauty will carry the memory of the earth into the new cycle. Those who walk in fear will fade like echoes of the old one. Yet even this is not judgment. It is simply vibration finding its match. And so, as 3i Atlas glows brighter each night, we are faced with the same decision our ancestors once faced under different skies, to forget or to remember. To the Hopi, the blue star is not a herald of war, but of choice. It is the universe asking softly but firmly, are you ready to live again in harmony? Because the fifth world is not waiting somewhere far away. It is waiting within every breath, every act of kindness, every time we look up and see the stars, not as strangers, but as family. The Hopi say the new world will rise when humanity remembers it was never separate from creation. And maybe that remembering has already begun. For as the elders remind, when the heart awakens and the earth finds her balance, silence follows. And in that silence, the light speaks. After revelation is not empty. It hums. The Hopi call it the voice of the earth, the low rhythm beneath all creation. Scientists call it the Schumann resonance, a frequency of 7.83 Hertz that vibrates through the atmosphere like a planetary heartbeat. But perhaps it is both. Perhaps this hum is what connects us. The song that began before language, before history, before time itself. As 3i Atlas draws nearer to the sun, its reflection brightens, casting a faint blue shimmer across the black. To astronomers, it is a celestial phenomenon. To the Hopi, it is remembrance made visible. They say that when the blue star messenger appears, the sky itself will remember its origins, and humanity, long lost in its own noise, will be forced to listen once more. But this is not the end of the world. It is the end of forgetting. The Hopi prophecy was never about fire and ruin. It was about awakening, about what happens when we finally remember that everything we do, every breath, every word, every choice, ripples through a living universe that listens. When the sky speaks, the elders say, listen not with your ears, but with your heart. In 2025, Atlas will make its closest pass. Perhaps it will fade. Perhaps it will shine brighter than expected. The event itself matters less than the awareness it stirs, because the true encounter is not in the heavens, it is here, in us. Prophecy is not prediction, it is preparation. It teaches us to see beyond fear, to meet the unknown not with panic, but with reverence. The Hopi never said we were doomed. They said we were powerful, powerful enough to remember creation itself. And maybe that is the secret hidden in all prophecy, that the end times are not destruction, they are awakening. As the blue light flickers across the dawn sky, the question remains, not will we survive? But will we listen? Because survival without remembrance is just repetition. But to remember, that is rebirth. Do not fear the light. Become it. Let it pass through you, the memory of stars, the hum of earth, the quiet rhythm of existence returning to balance. For when you align with that resonance, you are already part of the fifth world, not as witness, but as creator. So, when you look up and see that faint blue shimmer against the dark, don't think of endings. Think of beginnings written in starlight. Because what approaches is not a warning, it is an invitation, a call to remember who we were before we forgot. Stay awake, stay aware, and listen. The sky is speaking again. The fifth world is not coming, it is remembering.
Vind jij het belangrijk wat wij doen? Abonneer je dan op ons kanaal en deel deze uitzending met zoveel mogelijk mensen. En overweeg ook om Lighthouse TV bouwer te worden. Dan geef je ons die maandelijkse zekerheid. Maar wil je liever eenmalig doneren? Dan kan dat natuurlijk ook. Kijk eens op lighthousetv.nl/steun. Alvast bedankt.
Dit programma is mede mogelijk gemaakt door Bundel, ITAR Innovative Technology, Real Root Supplements, Pro Privacy en Moringa's Finest.